Yes, indeed. Greetings. Hello. Happy Sunday. And as always, we wish to the highest level of our capability that you are experiencing the best of health, physical, mental, and spiritual health, and that you're maintaining. Hopefully, you are engaging in some process to help you express your outrage at injustice, whether it's participating in street demonstrations or writing or talking to people or whatever way that is for you, artwork. Please continue to do that. We have to continue to struggle on all levels. And so we're glad that you're here with us today. Welcome to everybody who's joining us on this Sunday for this critical topic, looting, rebellion, and revolution. And before we start, as we do every time, we have to give thanks, recognition, solidarity to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And as always, that's whether that's people who identify using the term indigenous or Indian or Native or Latino. They're all descendants of the indigenous people. This hemisphere, this land was stolen from them. It was stolen, it was looted from them. And so we always acknowledge everything we do by acknowledging their suffering, acknowledging the fact that for 500 plus years, they have served as hosts for our existence in this hemisphere. So we thank them for that. And we do everything that we can to struggle to ensure that they will get their land back. It does not belong to you, it belongs to them. That is the definition of looting, stealing something that doesn't belong to them. So this very hemisphere is an example of looting. So we acknowledge the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And of course, we acknowledge our African ancestors who fought, who struggled, who died for our existence, millions of people who struggled from the eastern shores of Africa to the western shores of the Western Hemisphere, and every inch of soil and water between, they fought and they struggled for us. And so we acknowledge them and we honor their existence, and we continue that struggle today. As Kwame Ture said, we burn this country from plantations to cities. And that's definitely respect to our ancestors. And so we are going to start by talking about a very important topic. There's a lot of discussion about looting, a lot of discussion about rebellion, not so much about revolution, but all three topics are grossly misunderstood, grossly mass confusion about all of them. And none of this is by accident, all of it is by design. And so the purpose of the next hour is for us to break down these concepts and hopefully give people participating some analysis of, what they mean for our lives, our day-to-day lives, and hopefully giving you enough of a foundation so that you can talk to other people and help clear up this confusion. So let's just start. Before I turn it over and we do our introductions, just the quote at the bottom of this screen, just to give you some initial thoughts on the concept of looting. In December of 1964, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, better known as Malcolm X, during an interview was asked about the urban uprisings. And it's important to note that at that time, most of them had not even happened in this country yet. Really what the focus of the question came from the Harlem Rebellion that happened in the summer of 1964, in July of 1964, where the Africans in Harlem rebelled against, guess what? Police terrorism. And so during the interview, Malcolm was asked what he thought of the urban uprisings, and the same rhetoric that they use today, they use then. Like, why are the people burning up their own neighborhoods? How come, what good does it do the person who was victimized by police terrorism for them to burn up their own neighborhoods? And Malcolm heard all of these questions, and his response was, when a child touches a hot stove, the child doesn't respond by saying, oh, I touched a hot stove. That was probably not a good idea. The child responds by yelling and screaming and engaging in demonstrative behavior to demonstrate their pain. And Malcolm's point is that when people are suffering and when they're in pain, they react with an extreme response. So if you want to look at it in terms of the response of people who are engaging in activity in the streets that you might say, well, they shouldn't be doing that, understand that the pain and suffering that people experience, they're going to express that in a way relative to the suffering that impacts their lives. And we're here today to say that they have every right to that, no matter what that is. And that's the basis of how we're going to conduct this discussion for the next 55 minutes here. So if that's too much for you, you're probably not in the right place. But we'll go ahead and get started. We'll just do introductions as we always do to get started. So to do that, my name is Ajamu longtime organizer for the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And as always, this program is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. It's not just me, my effort. It's not just Shakura's effort. It's an effort of our party and our work to build Pan-African revolutionary struggle all over the African world. And then Shakura grew up within the All African People's Revolutionary Party's Young Pioneer Institute program. So she is a child student of the All African People's Revolutionary Party's programs. And she is now a PhD student in communication public health at the University of Memphis. And she engages in a series of activist organizing efforts there specific to African women's health. And I've had the opportunity to work with her a lot on the work that she's doing. And she obviously works with me a lot on the work that I'm doing. So she is an amazing person and so glad that she is here and that we're working together to do this. And going back to the AAPRP, the objective of the All African People's Revolutionary Party is Africanism, Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa. We believe that all people of African descent are Africans and belong to the African nation. And until Africa is free, united, and socialist, no African anywhere on earth will be free. And we believe that the primary reason why we suffer the indignities of police terrorism and everything else that we experience, the reason why we're the number one people dying from COVID, all of these things are related to the fact that we do not have power as a people. So the key to us achieving power is Pan-Africanism. So that's why that's our key objective. We have chapters all over the world. I've done work in probably about a dozen of them. And we also have relationships with other liberation movements around the world, particularly other national liberation movements, like the Filipino National Liberation Movement. I was just contacted by Gabriela, which is a woman's organization in the Filipino National Liberation Movement. And they've said they want to even intensify our relationships. And we are certainly willing and excited to do that. The struggles of the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, the Irish Republican Socialist struggle, the Palestinian National Liberation struggle. And if you want to go to YouTube under the All African People's Revolutionary Party page for African Liberation Day, if you didn't see that program, you really missed something. You really missed something there. If you want to go on there, you should look at the program. We have presentations from people in 11 countries talking about Pan-Africanism, the need for one unified socialist Africa. And we also had solidarity statements from all of those organizations and national liberation movements I just mentioned. So if you want to see those and see what they look like, you can go on our YouTube page and you can see them. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Shakura, who's going to talk more with us about this concept of looting.
Okay, thank you so much, Daddy. So I want to bring you all's attention to the first bullet, stealing from a place. That is a bourgeoisie definition of looting. That definition was not created by the masses of people. So as a result, you would think that since the definition was created by people of dominant control, it's meant as a way to oppress those who have no say in how that definition is used or applied in everyday common things that we think about, especially from an economic standpoint. So with that being said, even the definition clearly explains how the wealth of capitalism was obtained through stealing. Think about historically what it means to go back. So this means stealing indigenous lands. This means stealing African labor to build up those lands. This means bringing Africans and dispersing them all over the world and making sure that they have no concept of who they are, because their only value at this point is to serve other people, again, in dominant cultures that have the ability to express how they want those Africans to be used. This also means an institutionalized stealing of natural resources from Africa. And I think it's very important to think about that, because in my upbringing, what my parents have taught me and what the AAPRP has taught me is that basically the only reason that Africans all over the world are disrespected and devalued is because the continent itself is not respected. The continent itself is not valued. The only reason people see Africa as a means to an end is because it's a place where they can go, take what they need, and keep going. And so I think part of justice for African people means understanding that Africa itself deserves to have the respect that it's not currently getting. And I think once we do that, we can start to go back to the drawing board and start fresh from a clean slate. But we have to get to that point where Africans everywhere understand that they are from Africa, and more importantly, that we can respect the continent for what it does for each and every one of us every single day. Using all those things to build up an empire that continues to exploit the entire planet. So we're thinking about the indigenous people, we're thinking about Africans, other people who have suffered at the hands of the dominant person. We're thinking about all those things and how they have helped to build up capitalism and affected the entire planet. And that's where the looting actually happened. That's where the stealing was institutionalized. So the definition of theft has to do from the start and is defined by this undeniable history, that because of this history, these parts have been laid out that have basically explained the groundwork for the world that we live in today. And again, I think if you are questioning why people are doing what they're doing, I would first caution you to question how you're using the definition. Because like I said, it wasn't built from the masses of the collective. It wasn't defined from the masses of the collective. It was defined by people who have power and who can cause change to make things more oppressive for those that are not in power. So I would first caution you to think about how you're using that term looting, and then who are you applying it to? Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so if that wasn't clear in the first slide, I will say it again. Capitalism was built and is maintained by looting. We're forcing poor countries like Haiti, like in the first picture you see at the top, to pay monthly checks. So this is actually happening right now. Haiti is paying monthly checks to France for colonial dominating them. So they're paying them to continue being in a source of power for them as they colonize and dominate them. Looting is taking advantage of people suffering to jack up prices for water after the hurricane last year. The same thing is happening now with hand sanitizer. I mentioned to my dad that I am running out of Clorox wipes, and I tried to go online and purchase some, and someone had a 4-pack of maybe 28 wipes total, and the price was like $378. So like in a normal world, that would be totally ridiculous to pay that much money for a tiny little 4-pack of wipe, but that's the reality. And some people are so desperate, they know that they're willing to pay that because of the basic rule of supply and demand. So we think about what happened with the hurricane last year. We think about the jacked up prices of hand sanitizer now, or tissue, toilet paper. We all could give examples of how this is happening. Capitalism is the very definition of looting. The stores that were broken into and ransacked, imagine a business that is a part of a community. So just close your eyes and think about that. This business is a part of the community. That means that the business hires people in that community and pays them a living wage, a decent living wage. Not a living wage, but a decent living wage, pays them and treats them well, actually treats their employees ethically, with respect and equality. We can't even imagine anything like that. But there are places in the world where this is happening. This is happening every single day, where people are respected and treated with dignity and a chance for them to contribute because they want to contribute, not because they're being forced or mandated or oppressed to do such things. This opens up that the business that we're thinking about, that we're imagining, right? This business allows the space in the community to be a place where people feel welcomed, and they want to have events at this business because they trust the people running the business. The business has an open line of communication with the community. There's no backhanded stuff or malicious activities going on, but this business has made it very clear that they are down for the masses of the people, and they will do whatever is necessary from the people so that the business can continue to serve who? The people that it's serving, right? That's the number one objective. So if we think about that, my question to you is, do you truly believe that that type of business would get burned down? Like, honestly, just think about that for a minute. This business has been in the makings of supporting the community and making sure that everyone there has gained the business's trust, because the business has never let them down. So why would anyone threaten to take that down? Why would anyone light a match to that? That's the question I'm asking you. Most of the people losing businesses operate in a way where the most disenfranchised people were most likely not openly welcome into their places of business. That's why people in their frustration went after them. But that's not looting. That is not looting. I know socially we've been taught that that's looting, but that's not looting. That's a low-level attempt to try and even out the odds, nothing more. Just trying to even out the odds. So what we have to be mindful of is we can't let capitalistic media confuse us into defining looting based on low-level acts of frustrated people who are trying to bring justice that's long overdue by the term of measurable of 500 plus years. And so because of that, this institutional looting has continued to decompress and suppress and oppress humanity. And that's one of the ways that people are trying to just speak up and let their voices be heard, is they're sick of it. And they understand that this is one way that they can express their frustration, even though, again, we're not using this bourgeoisie definition of looting. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakur. I just wanted to, your talking points and things you talked about really, you and I had this discussion. I'll share it with everyone else here. I'm sick to my stomach of hearing about these business owners and their stores were looted and they've lost everything. You know what? I don't care. I mean, this is the reality, you all. And if it offends you, that's fine if it offends you, but you should be able to refute it. And you won't be able to refute it because it's irrefutable. So since these the protests and uprisings have been taking place, I hadn't really had much of a reason to drive anywhere. I just took that opportunity Thursday for the first time in weeks to drive around the city here, Sacramento, where I live, down in the downtown, midtown area where I live. And what I noticed immediately is a lot of the businesses down here are boarded up. And a lot of them have, and the ones that aren't boarded up have signs in their window, Black Lives Matter. They didn't have any of that before. And it just really, like, where a lot of people, oh, this is great, this is wonderful. Yeah, and I get that, but it was offensive to me because a lot of these businesses, I've gone in there before all of this started, and I got the same, like, what are you doing in here stares that I get every day of my existence in this society. And so what that says to me is, it took a physical threat against your building for you to put that up. So, like the example Shakur gave, a business that speaks out against injustice and has, all of its operations based on justice, that business doesn't get burned down. That business doesn't get looted. And if you have participated in any kind of demonstrations, you know that, because it's not like the capitalist media tries to present it, where people are just marching down the street and they see a business and they just start breaking the windows, or they see a car and they just start with no provocation. Like, I've organized dozens of demonstrations and participated in dozens more, and I've never seen anything like that in my life. The reason why those things start happening is because of the things that happened like Monday, where people demonstrating peacefully in front of the White House in Washington, D.C. are brutally and terroristically moved out. That offends people. It makes people angry when people are disrespected like that. So then, as Malcolm said 50 plus years ago, they take their anger out on the representations of the power structure. That's why those things happen. That's why urban rebellions happen, you all. That's the only reason that they happen. Nobody is out looking for trouble like they try to say. Nobody is out trying to say, well, we're just going to tear up stuff. That's a fantasy. All of this is a reflection of the exploitation of this system. And so, when people are, again, disconnected, angry, frustrated at the injustices, and then all they do is speak out against the injustice, and then there's more repression against them, then that's why people respond the way they do. And yeah, I get it. Like the person at the corner store is not the power structure. I understand that. We get that. That's a foregone conclusion. But those people are not doing anything to combat the power structure either. And since the people can't get at the power structure, those entities, those corner stores, are representative to them of the power structure. So they take their frustration and anger out on them. Again, these are businesses that are not doing all the things that Shakur talked about, because if they were, the people would pass them by. But they see them as exploitative. They go in there, the people disrespect them, the products are overpriced and low quality. And so the entire existence is one of disrespect. So now the people have the opportunity, they take that frustration out on those entities. It's very important that we understand that, because that's what it is. And the people who, of course, facilitated all of this theft and destruction of the indigenous people's land, the murder, the consistent colonialism and neocolonialism of Africa, the kidnapping of millions of Africans, are in no position. The people who stand on that platform, and if you call yourself an American, that's what you're doing. You're standing on that platform by the very nature of labeling yourself like that. So the people who do that have no moral authority to question how people stand up and react to righteous indignation at oppression. And so because of that, urban resistors, they can never be the definition of violence. I mean, that's insane. That's like somebody kidnapping you, holding you in a cellar for 10 years and brutalizing you the entire 10-year period. And when you finally figure out a way to get loose and to attack them so that you can escape and gain freedom, that you become defined as the attacker. That's absolutely absurd. But that's what the system seeks to do when it attempts to blame the masses of people reacting to oppression as being the people perpetuating the violence. The only violence that happens in these streets is initiated by police. And if you don't believe that, all you have to do is go out there and observe, and you'll see that. Only violence is initiated by police. That's who initiates the violence. So capitalist societies, again, they kill millions of people at a drop of the hat. No moral credibility, zero moral credibility to define how people should struggle against the injustice, because it's a lie anyway. When the footballers and Colin Kaepernick, when they dropped to one knee, they still didn't want that. We have been peacefully protesting for 100 years in this society, going back to the lynching years of the 90s, 1919, 100 years ago, where hundreds of thousands of Africans wore white and marched quietly through the streets in an effort at that time to convince the dominant European society here that we were no threat to them. And those efforts did nothing to mitigate the violence and terror that was directed at us. Nothing. In fact, they more so created conditions where more of that took place against us. So these people saying, well, I support peaceful protest, but I just don't like the looting. Those people don't want any type of protest against this capitalist system. Any type of effort to stand up and speak about injustice, they don't even want to hear anything about that. So that's why you have these idiots like this dumb football player in New Orleans. Well, my grandfather fought for, so what? Who cares what your your grandfather, whoever he was, went to another country, invaded another country. They should have been killed for going over there. That's the reality. And if you think that's harsh for us to say that, then tell me that if someone broke in your house, you would just say, okay, well, I guess that's how it is. You broke in my house, take whatever you want and have a wonderful rest of your day. No, you would do everything you could to prevent that person from violating you like that. So that, it's time for us to drop all this nonsense. I'm sick of hearing it. I mean, it's absurd. It's time for us to say, like, that makes absolutely no sense. Clearly, the people who are out there on the streets are out there for a reason. If there was no police terrorism, they wouldn't be out there in the first place. It's not like they just, hey, let's go break some windows today. No, it's the injustice is what initiates that. And anybody who stands for justice, we have to start saying that and stop using the language of the oppressor. The looters, stop talking like that. Because that's if you want to use that term, use it in reference to the capitalist system. When instead of saying the United States of America, say the looter state of America, now that's an accurate use of the word. And if you're not using it that way, you're a part of the problem. So let's compare this question of rebellion, one thing really quick, to organized revolution, because there's confusion. There are quite a few people who think that they're the same thing. And that's because the capitalist system, the way they educate, any effort to rise up against them is the same thing. And it's all wrong. It's never good. It's never justified. It's all wrong. So they want you to think that spontaneous rebellions, which is what these are that you're seeing in the last 2 weeks, is the same as organized revolution. And what you see in the last 2 weeks, again, is people who are fed up with unjust conditions, consistent, systemic unjust conditions. And they don't have another vehicle to do that. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, he's quoting him, he said, riots are the voice of the unheard. And so they get out and they express themselves. And again, this happens after they're responding to the oppression, and then in peacefully protesting, they're attacked again. So then they revert to tearing things up. That's a spontaneous rebellion. Again, we're not speaking against spontaneous rebellions. What we're saying is that if we really want to solve the problem, we need much more than just a spontaneous rebellion, because the problem with spontaneous rebellions is they're not organized. And so people get out, they're on the streets, they don't even have the proper face coverings, and I don't just mean masks against COVID. They don't have a way to protect themselves from the chemical agents that the police are inevitably gonna rain down on them. So once that happens, they're done for the night. And so we see the same scenario. If you look at over the last 50 years, people get out on the streets spontaneously, they rebel, they call in the National Guard, 2 or 3 days goes by and everything is over. The rebellion is over. So clearly that's not the method that's gonna solve these problems for us. We're not criticizing it, but that's not the way that we're gonna solve these problems. So we need something much more. And a lot of the discussion, in the protests, and it's great people are protesting, but most of what you hear people talking about are things like funding police. And it's a novel concept, but the reality is that your tax dollars are always going to pay for police, even if they don't have contracts with schools, because that's what they're talking about, the funding, like they don't have contracts with schools any longer, but your tax dollars are always going to pay for police in this system. So that doesn't seem like it will do much to alleviate the problem. It will do a lot to make a lot of people feel better about the problem, but it won't do much to alleviate the problem. Talking about the body cameras, again, they've perfected the art of turning them off when they're about to brutalize people. So that's clearly not the solution. All of these things, oversight boards, All of these things, again, they're like feel right things, but they have proven not to be solutions to solving the problem of police terror. And as we've said in many of the seminars before, police terror occurs because the African masses in particular, a lot of people, but particularly the African masses, are a constant threat to the stability of the capitalist system, because the capitalist system was built and maintained on our backs. So the system will never view us as equal citizens under the law. To them, we're a constant fifth column. And in fact, in actuality, that's exactly what we are. We're a constant threat to rebel against the system. That's the reason why we burn this city from plantations to cities. We burn this country, rather, from plantations to cities. That's the reason why we do that all over the world, where this capitalist system has been built on our backs. We have had urban rebellions in the last 10 years in Melbourne, Australia, Sydney, Australia, Paris, France, London, England, Berlin, Germany. We've had them in Toronto, Canada, all throughout the United States of America. We have, this is our reality, because we're still slaves on the plantation. And the capitalist system needs Africa's cheap rare earth minerals to fuel its profitability. And therefore, it needs the children of Africa to be scattered, dispersed, disempowered, and exploited to ensure that that system stays intact. So that's the role of the police. That's why they're out here. That's what they're here to do. They were never here to protect and if you believe that, you're watching fantasy cartoons on television. So because that's their role, that's what they're going to continue to do. And so this constant cycle we get in of reacting to the and hitting the streets and then being repulsed by the agents of capitalism and imperialism, that is a very limited process in terms of us making progress to actually solve the problem. So that's why it can never be enough what we're doing now. But the difference with organized revolution is something very different from spontaneous rebellion. Organized revolution is where the people get together and they organize a coordinated response to attacking the system. They organize a coordinated response, a long-term protracted struggle against the system that's rooted in a specific ideology. Now, these urban rebellions, you see, the people out there, you don't know what their ideology is. You're not even having conversations with them. You're just marching. If you go to demonstrations, I'm right. If you go to these demonstrations, I'm absolutely right. There might be a speaker or speakers, but the masses of people there, you don't have really, unless you initiate a personal conversation with someone, you don't have any idea what their objectives or ideology or any of that is. An organized revolution is spurred by a specific ideological objective. So Pan-Africanism, for example, it's not just a bunch of people getting together. We don't know each other. We don't know what people are going to do. It's everybody that is engaged in a struggle around the ideological components of Nkrumah's Touré's thought, which is the ideology of the African Revolution. So if you watch Liberation Day, or if you go back and watch the video, which you really should, what you'll find is people from all those countries I talked about saying the same thing, that common ideological objective. All of them saying, the people from the African Party for Independence in Guinea-Bissau, the people from Ghana, the people from Azania, South Africa, all of them saying we need one unified socialist Africa. The people from the United States saying the same thing. That's one ideological component. So we have Nkrumah's Touré's thought, the ideology that guides our action. Our action is fighting for Pan-Africanism on the ground. That's our objective, Pan-Africanism. So that's an example of an organized revolution. The picture here is of the youth in Cuba, who are clearly, contrary to what you're told, supportive of their revolution in Cuba. The Cuban people love their revolution, despite what you're told and what your Cuban friend told you. Because that's people's analysis. Well, I have a friend from Cuba and they said, like, that's really scientific. You know, people say all kind of things for all kind of reasons. You know, you have to be able to have the analytical capacity to dig deeper than that. So the Cuban Revolution was fought for Marxist-Leninists. That's the ideology they fought their revolution under, Marxist-Leninist ideas to create a scientific socialist, and they have that there. So one ideology, that's why, you know, the Cuban Revolution has thwarted the efforts of almost a dozen US presidents. And nobody here understands why. That's the reason why, because they have a clear focus of what they're doing, what they're trying to do. They have an ideology that guides them, and they have an objective that guides them. So that's what revolutionary struggle is. It's an ideological objective that guides your action, and everything is planned. You have a mass campaign. So you hear us talk about community defense. So we've talked a lot about the struggle on the ground in Africa to achieve Pan-Africanism, just as an example. And so along with that, we have these community defense efforts that come up all over the world, so that when we call for a mass strike, we're organized to make sure that that happens and that we can carry it out. So what does it look like? Well, if you use Cuba, for example, because they did it, you have people in the cities who are organizing among the workers, organizing among the students, organizing among women, organizing among the elderly. And when the call is made, when the plan is dictated, when the people decide, then nobody goes to work today. Like there were instances spontaneous in the last weeks where in I think it was New Jersey, where the bus drivers were refusing to drive the police to the spots to engage and terrorize protesters. But that was just bus drivers' individual initiative and courage. Imagine if it was organized. And so now nobody's going to go to work. Nobody's going to clean streets. Nobody's going to teach in school. Nobody's going to engage in construction. Nobody's going to do anything. Nobody's going to work in hospitals. Nobody's going to do anything until justice is served. Imagine if we had that organized around a specific ideology. That's the way that you engage a revolutionary struggle, by working with people and preparing people to be prepared to carry out those acts. So when they did that in Cuba, they had millions of people on the streets with the same objective, overthrowing the government. They weren't on the streets during the Cuban Revolution talking about, well, we just need to give cameras to the police. They had the same understanding and objective. This government has got to go. And so you cannot defeat the masses of the people. That's not possible. I don't care how much technology you have. Like I said before, Huey Newton said that the man's technology will never match the spirit of the people. I don't care how much technology you have. Once the people are united and understand their objective, you can't defeat them. And that comes from stealing people in revolutionary ideology, which is the political education we talk about. So revolution is planned, and it's planned around achieving the objective of a new society under a new type of system that places people ahead of profit. That's revolution. It's not spontaneous. Everybody participating in the revolution, and I'm talking about millions of people, understands why they're doing it. They understand that the system is going to change. Like nobody in the Cuban Revolution was like, well, I thought we were just trying to elect more people who would, no, nobody was confused about that. They all knew that they needed a new system. It had to be a socialist system. That's what revolution is, uncompromising change. So in order for people to support that, they have to understand it. And once they understand it, they're the ones who make it come about. And so that's the difference. That's what we need. So look at the bottom there. You want something to remember: urban uprisings, spontaneous reaction. A just spontaneous reaction to unjust oppression. Revolution is planned and organized resistance. So when you shut the cities down, like during the Cuban Revolution, they stopped. At that time, sugar was the main export of Cuba, and they were the largest exporter of Cuba in the Western Hemisphere. And the revolution shut down sugar production in Cuba, just shut it down. Nobody was working in the sugar plantations and factories. Nobody was working. So that crushed the Cuban economy. So imagine here if we had something similar to that, where nobody was willing to work in all of the industries. None of the technical people were willing to work. All the workers at Google said, we're not working anymore, until there's justice. Everybody, instead we're going to hack into all of the FBI mainframe. We're going to let people know what their strategies are to repress the revolution. Imagine that. That's how, when you get to that level, you have, then victory is on the horizon. And then you get to the point where the police say, you know what, we recognize that we're on the wrong side of history and we're not going to do it anymore. So we're not going out to repress the people in the streets. In fact, we're going to take our uniforms off and we're going to join them. There's going to be a massive blue flu call in tomorrow. No police are coming to work. That's when you know that victory is right in front of you. And that only happens through the organized planning of a revolutionary process. I don't know about you all, but what we're saying is this is exactly what we need. This is what we have to escalate to achieve. So clearly, like, you can't expect to explain revolution in 20 minutes. But the point is, again, at the bottom, you have spontaneous uprising compared to planned, organized revolution. So just a summary, just to understand kind of, what this all means, what we come to the conclusion of is some of the challenges we have right now is like there are too many of us who are relying on the power structure for our information. And who am I talking about when I say that? Well, if you're not, and I'm just going to challenge you all, if you're not engaged in like, I know all of us, we want to think, yeah, I'm conscious, I know what's going on. I get that, I understand that. But if you're not engaged in an organization with a political education process, there's no way you're going to be able to convince me that you're getting consistent quality information. There's no way you're going to be able to do that. Because if you're just like kind of just haphazardly, you read something here, even if it's on social media, and you're not reading like capitalist publications or watching capitalist TV news, then you're still relying on an analysis that you don't even know if you can trust because you don't have a consistent foundation to give you the tools to analyze it that way. So that's one thing, but then still, if you're on top of that, you're still watching TV news, even if you watch it for just 2 or 3 minutes, then you're still getting their analysis and you don't have anything on the other side to combat that. So whether you realize it consciously or not, you're still on a subtle level being impacted by imperialist propaganda. So that's a major problem. Too many people are reliant on the power structure or imperialist propaganda for your analysis. That's why most people aren't doing anything. Even though people think they're conscious about the problem, they're not really doing anything to address it. That's the reason why, because subconsciously you have accepted the analysis from our enemies that you really cannot defeat them and there's not really anything you can do. On some level, you've accepted that. And that's why you don't do anything. That's why there's a saying, it's so important. It says that if you want to know what you would have done during slavery and colonial times, look at what you're doing now. If if you're not in an organization, you're not engaging in consistent struggle to topple this system and end this suppression, then don't tell us, well, I would have, but slavery would have rose up, took the whip from the map. No, you would have done the same thing you do it. You would have sat there and justified rationales for why you just need to continue to pick cotton on the plantation. I mean, it's not knocking on anybody. Love you all, but that's just the reality of it. It's irrefutable, and so then the other thing is that, again, we have to have this comprehensive political education in our organizations to drive us towards understanding how to create organized revolutionary processes, or if you don't want that, to at least help you understand how to build mass movement in the reform work they're doing. So that has to happen. And so if you look at it technically, you're talking about the Cuban revolutionary mass organizing and armed struggle, which started in 1956. If you recall, if you know the history, if you study it, you know that they left Mexico. There were about 85 combatants. That was Fidel Castro, Raul Castro, Che Guevara, Juan Almeida. All of them left Mexico, and they had the Grandma ship, and their intention was to sail to disembark and to engage in a guerrilla warfare in Cuba. But the Grandma sunk, and only about a dozen people survived. And so they went up to the mountains there, the Sierra Maestras, and they started the armed struggle. But they didn't just do that alone. Like, they had a strong urban network. Frank Paz, names you probably don't know. Frank Paz, Vilma Espin, who was the one of the main organizers there of the urban, the mass network that they had. Celia Sanchez was another main contributor. Frank Massetti. These were all the people who put all this in motion. And so these are the people that organized the workers, the students, the women, the elderly people, and they had community defense networks on the ground that were ready to strike to support the guerrillas who were fighting in the mountain. So you can't have the armed struggle without the political education, and you can't have political education without the armed struggle also. So that's what happened between 1956 and 1959. So because they had all these efforts taking place, and people saw that, as they encountered peasants in the mountains, they were able to engage them with political education. So they would capture them. Many of them were in the military, and they were grossly mistreated, underpaid, exploited in the Cuban military. And so when the guerrillas captured them, they would tell them, like, we're not against you, we're fighting to make a better life for you. And so they didn't brutalize them and kill them. They didn't create a Guantanamo Bay or any of these torturous reactionary institutions that US imperialism creates. They gave them political education. They took their guns and they let them go. And most of those people ended up joining the guerrilla movement. So their forces on the guerrilla side grew. The same approach they did in the cities. So the forces on their city side grew in terms of their, urban networks and the mass networks that they created. So this is the proven process as to how you build, revolutionary success. So with that foundation, and then once their revolution was successful, they were able to initiate the literacy campaign. At that time, 80% of the people in Cuba couldn't read or write. A lot of those were the Africans in Cuba. So they initiated the literacy campaign. And they, in less than a year, they reversed that so that over 90% of the people in Cuba could read or write. So what you do for people when you make sure they can read or write, now they have the ability to gain knowledge and information. And if they have that, they can meet their potential and make their contribution to society. So they were able to came upon the special period when the Soviet Union fell in 1989, 1990. All these reactionaries, maybe even some of you, the Cuban Revolution, they're not going to survive now. But you didn't understand all the things that I just got through talking about. So the people were grounded in revolutionary ideology. So even though they didn't have anything, they were able, because of their commitment to the Cuban Revolution, they were able to engage in a clear process to consolidate the revolution. They had constant political education talk. They changed their entire economy from one that relied primarily on sugar to one that changed biomedical research and many other areas that now today Cuba is leading the world in. Like I can tell you right now, they will be one of the first, if not the first countries to come up with a COVID vaccine that's trustworthy and works. And the interferon alpha-2b they've been using has been proven very effective at treating people. All of this, they were able to create on their own, but it was because they had a model that went to the people for solutions. That's what they did in those years 90s, and they survived that. And now today, even imperialist organizations like the World Health Organization and the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are saying Cuba's economy is stabilizing. It's one of the most promising ones in the Western Hemisphere. Their schools, their children, their education, the best educated in the Western here. Even they're saying that. So this is the revolutionary process. It's a process. It's a protracted struggle. It's not a temporary thing. It's not spontaneous. It's not none of that. And so this is what we were talking about. And yes, someone I saw in the chat, Jamila mentioned, thank you for bringing that up, Jamila. She gave a great example of the Elian Gonzalez situation from the year 2000. If you don't know about that, you should go back and study that. The U.S. imperialism was confused. That's why the Cubans make them look bad on every stretch. They made them look bad with the Guerin or the Bay of Pigs. They made them look bad with the missiles in October in 1962. They made them look bad when they accepted all the African freedom fighters from Huey Newton, Robert Williams, Huey Newton to Assata Shakur. They made them look bad with the Mario Boat lift in 1980, where Cuba released all their worst criminals. This country was saying they were repressed. They weren't repressed. They were criminals, violent criminals in prison in Cuba. And so Jimmy Carter, oh, they were repressed and they're jailed in Cuban prison. So Castro said, well, you love them so much, you take them. So they took 125,000 criminals into this country. And the movie Scarface with Al Pacino is a fictional representation of that. So they got them then on that. They've gotten them every step of the way. And Elian Gonzalez case was another one of those circumstances where these fools here, they truly believed that Elian's grandmothers and his father would come here and they encouraged them to defect and come here. But these people were politically educated. They understood the reason for their revolution. They weren't trying, they just wanted their son back, their family back. They offered Elian Gonzalez's father $50 million to defect to the US, and he turned it down. Said, I don't want your money. I'm here for justice. I want my son. And as Jamila said, his son and the father still dedicated revolutionaries to the Cuban Revolution. Now, most of you, they offered you $50 million. You would, before they even got the offer out, you would accept it because you don't have the proper political education. So this is what we need. You know, that's the only way you can help people get to the point where they're like, okay, this is more important than just making money. Because those of us here, that's all we've ever been trained. Make money, get money, get it, get money, get money. So the minute an offer like that comes to us, we'll take it. And then we don't understand how many of you hearing this, they're like, he turned down $50 million? Are you serious? You can't even comprehend that. Because the only way you interpret the world is through money. So you can't understand why somebody would turn down money for values and a better way of life. But that's what the revolutionary process is about, you all. And it's the only way that we can effectively solve these problems. There is no way that you can really care about African lives, but say nothing about the capitalist system, which is the reason why African lives are disrespected and murdered. You cannot serve two masters. You can't support both. You can't support African lives and support capitalism. And if you're not anti-capitalist, you support capitalism. Guess what? You support capitalism. If you're talking about the solution being body cameras and defunding police, you support capitalism. Because really what you're saying is that, well, we just need to change and tweak a few things and then that'll fix the problem. We don't have to do anything with capitalism. We don't have to do away with that. We just have to tweak it. So you support capitalism. That's what that means. So if you support capitalism, there's no way you can support African lives because this system is built on exploiting Africans. And George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, they're just the most recent manifestations of that. But it's been happening for 500 plus years to African and indigenous people. So it's not just something that happened in the last couple of weeks. So there's no way you can separate that. There's no way you can separate that. You have to acknowledge that. So, you know, somebody said to me the other day, well, the Confederate flag, yeah, that's a symbol of slavery. And they had on the American flag. And I said, yeah, so is that. That's a symbol of slavery too. They're the same. Not one is not worse than the other. They're all the same. And until we acknowledge that, then we're just playing games, just playing rhetorical. I support African lives. No, you don't. You just want to make yourself feel better in some way to coexist with the suffering that people are experiencing. Because somewhere inside you, there's at least a part of a moral reality that says this is wrong. So you're trying to address that, but you haven't reached the point where you're really ready to do something to make the problem go away. That's our analysis of it. and we're sticking to it. All right. So the last thing we have here today is the same thing we bring to you always at the end of our sessions, is we just want to be able to tell you again, join an organization. Political education in the nation is the key. Building a community defense project to go with that is the other element that's necessary. Please do that if you're interested in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. If you're African and you're interested in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, please contact us. Now, we are so thankful and humble. We get hundreds of people watching this every Sunday, 400 or 500 people. So there should be at least 30 or 40 of you out here who are like, okay, I want to get involved in an organization. I want to make sure that I participate. So if you're African, we want to invite you to join the AAPRP. And we have a work studies circle process, a political education process. And it's beautiful because you can participate in that and you're not yet a member of the AAPRP. So you can participate in that and you could say, yeah, that was great, but I really don't think I want to do that. I want to do something else. And we would say to you, join some organization working for our people. It's not a gang, not a cartel. It's not like you can't leave once you start the work study circle process. But what I've seen in all my years in the party is anyone who seriously participates in work study, they don't leave because they get the political education. They understand what it is. I've never had a single person say, participate for months consistently. Now, I'm not talking about what a lot of us do, like come to one meeting, not even read the material, come late, miss the next meeting, come 2 meetings after that, halfway through the meeting, didn't read. That's not participation. I'm talking about seriously participating, where you read, study, you're prepared, you're ready. 6 months of that, people are always understanding why we're doing what we're doing, and they want to dedicate their lives to it. So it's their decision, because that's what political education isn't about legislating your behavior. It's about providing you with the information so that you can make your own decisions. So with that, there are sources here that can help you do that. We have our site, aprp-intl.org. You can get as much information about us as you possibly can. You can find out information about all the work we're doing all over the world. And then I have a blog that I write in support of our AAPRP work, abetterworld.me. You can read that. There are articles there. I wrote one. I wrote a couple that have each had over 1,000 likes each in the last week. So that's good. People are reading them, spreading them. That's good. Please continue that. Very much appreciate it, because it's political education. That's the key. And then there are other ones out there like thehoodcommunist.org. I'm honored and fortunate to write for that. It's African revolutionaries from multiple African revolutionary organizations. So we encourage you to study that one as well, read it and participate in that. But again, we want to ask you, like, reach out to us through the first 2 sites if you're interested in the AAPRP. And if you're not interested, if you want to build an organization, we can give you our template and help you do that. But again, you know, our efforts are focused around revolutionary organizations. So what ends up happening is a lot of people reach out and they talk to me and they want to talk about how to do other things. And I'm not, that's great. You know, any activism is good, but that's not the work that we do. So we're really positioned to help you, you know, figure out how to build like mutual aid organizations. That's beautiful if you're doing that, but that's not really what I'm offering when I say I'll help you. I'm talking to people who want independent organizations with political education companies, and they need help doing that. That's what we're offering to help you do. Okay, so if all of that sounds good, I've been going a while. We have a couple minutes left. I've been trying to check the different sites. Shakur, I don't know if you see anything that needs to be addressed before we conclude, and I'll check as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that Jamila and Bobby, they both were commenting on how there's several business owners in Minneapolis who said if their businesses were smashed, that's what has to happen for justice to be seen. And Bobby echoed what Jamila said. And then just more people in support, Imani and Eduardo, in support of points that you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, and those are great points, you all. It's like, it reminds me of, there used to be a bookstore in Los Angeles called Various Books. It was the oldest African bookstore there. And in the 1992 LA Rebellion, it burned down. It was not, the store was not intentionally burned down. The strip mall that it existed in was set on fire, and the store was an unfortunate victim of that. And the sister who owned the store, the TV news put her on TV, and they wanted her to, denounce the rebellion. And then she said, if that's what it takes, just like you all said, these business owners say, that's what it takes, and that's what it takes. We have to do what we have to do that. And so, that's a sign. Like, people ask, well, are we making any progress? Well, some of those things are signs that, in a way, we are making progress. We just have to intensify the effort. We have to throw oil on that fire. And the way we do that is by getting more people involved. And so, there's a session, a protest of colonized people only happening here right now. So I'm going to leave here and go down there and pass out literature and talk to people and do the work. So encourage you to do that as well, and continue to participate. And we will, of course, have another subject next week, and we will announce that. And we appreciate all of you for coming and participating here. We thank you for the work that you are doing, and we encourage you to stay positive and encouraged, because it is having an impact. Even if you're participating in a study group and you're talking to people about what you're studying, that has an impact. And then when you go out and engage in action on top of the study, that has an even larger impact. So keep doing what you're doing. Everybody here has a contribution to make. Everybody here has skills that I don't have, so we need you to contribute your skills to the struggle. So that's what makes us stronger. So just want to encourage you on that. What I hope you see is a very positive note, that we keep that in mind. Stay engaged, stay involved, talk to more people, try to talk to someone new every week, get people engaged, talk about these concepts we're talking about here, try to talk to people about these concepts, help people understand, who the real looters are, what urban rebellion is, what revolution is. Have those conversations with folks. And the more we do that, the stronger we'll be. So with that, we just want to thank you all for being here today, and encourage you to have a very productive and positive week, and say forward ever, backwards never. Reach out to us if you want to expand on this, and we look forward to seeing you real soon. Forward ever, backwards never.